Hey everyone, Ed40 here with another Hardcore Nuzlocke in my Banning Half the Pokédex series, this time in Black 2. If this is your first time watching the series, that means that I'm only using half the Pokemon introduced in Gen 5, minus starters, legendaries, and pseudo-legendaries. In addition, every Unova line not in my last video is available in this one. But because not everyone is available in the main game, that leaves me with a total of 27 Pokemon, though I can only catch a max of 22. Here are the rules in short. You can only catch the first viable encounter in each area, there are no duplicate encounters, if a Pokemon faints, they're dead, there are no items in battle outside of held items, and there are level caps equal to each gym leader or champion's ace. Now let's get this party started! Overall, with the exception of the Gen 7 games, I think my Pokemon opinions are mostly in line with the communities, especially the Nuzlocking communities. But the place we diverge the most is by far the Black 2, White 2 games. These are, with the exception of the Let's Go games, if you want to count them, my least favorite Pokemon games with unique stories out of the whole series. This is for a few reasons. Most important is that it's hard for me to think about these games outside of their context as sequels. It's a little unfair, admittedly, but so much of the game feels like a retread. From the villain arc to the fact that the entire mid-game plays the exact same way. This is the first game in the series where it feels like we're overflowing with type diversity. And I like the gym leaders and the new areas they brought in, but I'm just constantly comparing it to the originals. And unlike a game like Gale of Darkness, these just don't feel like full standalone games to me. Team Plasma is kinda interesting, but mostly perfunctory. And everything just refers back to the original games like it's Gold and Silver to Kanto or something, making a lot of the new characters introduced feel kinda dull, with a challenging but pretty uninteresting rival, and one of my least favorite protagonist designs in the boy that I've ever seen. The pacing is also frustrating. Most of the other issues I have could be forgiven, but despite starting out strong, I always feel like I grind to a halt after the 6th gym. You just keep hopping from place to place without a lot of tethering to make it feel smooth. As a result, while there actually is a lot that I like about these games and definitely understand why a lot of people love them, they're also not games I come back to often personally. But with that, it's time to really get the game going. I picked my favorite starter, Snivy, giving my rival Tepig, who's just gonna be dominant against most of my available options. And that's starting with my Route 19 encounter, a Patrat I catch and name the Strokes. She's got an amazing plus speed minus special attack jolly nature, so after some training, we're ready to go. After Alder somehow knows where my rival is, I head on up to Flakessi Ranch and run around the you-know-what grass patch to find and catch a Lillipup I name LCD Sound System. With some training, it's time to fight my rival for the first time with run-approved Pokemon. I lead LCD. After Tackle does a quarter on Tepig and a returning Tackle does a quarter to LCD, I start lowering Tepig's defense. I get 2 Leers in before I decide that a crit tackle is probably going to kill LCD, so I swap into Strokes on a weak tackle. But thanks to Tepig's defense getting dropped so much, a tackle KOs for an easy win. Now, Chirin is one of the topper first gym leaders in the series, but it's kind of funny that we have an identical team to him. I debated doing challenge mode here, but I'm not actually sure which is harder, considering the challenge mode Pokemon have the same stats as the normal mode Pokemon due to a coding error, despite being higher levels. Its level caps also allow for more evolutions, so I figured that normal mode might be a little bit more of a challenge, despite the fewer Pokemon and lack of items. But let me know in the comments what your experiences have been with these game modes, because I've never really played around with them. Anyways, I lead Strobes, and outspeed as Tackle does over half. Chirin's Patrat just sets up Workup, so another Tackle KOs outright. Next up is Lillipup, and he outspeeds and crits with Tackle. Thankfully, Strokes has an Oranberry, but that could have been bad if she didn't. Tackle does about a third in return. I go for one more, as Lillipup tackles again to leave her at 8 HP. But now that Lillipup is in healing range, I'm comfortable switching into LCD as Chirin potions. Thankfully, LCD looks like he outspeeds, so Tackle brings Lillipup under half before he responds with a Workup. That means that one more Tackle gets the KO and the win for our first badge. Much better than I was expecting for an identical matchup. LCD didn't even take a point of damage. And now that I can move on, I find and catch a Venipede on Route 20 I name Anthrax. The Gen 5 bugs are really one of the highs of these games, so I'm hyped to have her. And then, LCD evolves into a Herdier. This one has Sand Rush instead of the much more helpful Intimidate, but I'm still happy to get a pretty big stat boost right before Roxy. The Verbeek gym is one of the coolest gyms in the series, by the way. It's so fun to me that even the music changes after each battle as you stop the trainers from playing. I wish more gyms did that, honestly. Now, my team doesn't match up amazingly against Roxy, but I think there's a trick at my disposal that's gonna really help me out. See, the Strokes, who I lead with, learns Hypnosis right before the level cap, meaning that she can put Coughing to sleep, much like their music does to me. This happens on the first turn, so now I just immediately switch into LCD, who begins to work up. I could have brought Anthrax in, but she's a little too weak here to really be as effective as I'd like her to be. Coughing wakes up on the first turn of workup, just going for a tackle. I think I should be fine if I keep setting up with LCD until either he gets poisoned or falls under half health, which happens after my fourth workup. But I miscalculated a bit because Bite does half to Coughing, letting her get an Assurance in. This means that when Coughing finally falls, I've only got 19 HP on LCD to work with. Bite does over half to Whirlipede, but she uses Venoshock. I have no idea how much it'll do. But LCD survives on 6 HP, and then, with one final bite, gets us the win. As an aside, Whirlipede's cry is maybe the most terrifying one in the series. Jeez. Now, this is kind of becoming a hot take video, but I actually like Pokéstar Studios. I think that the major criticisms of it are that it's required to progress the storyline. You don't necessarily get anything out of it other than some weak healing items, and the scripts are just kinda dumb. But while all these things are true, it's also just so silly. These movies are so nonsensical that they kinda circle around to becoming pure camp. It's also so funny that they can make like 28 billion Poke off box office alone, carried by an ex-gym leader and a random 10-year-old. I had a friend growing up who, when these games came out, played Pokéstar Studios for months instead of moving on to the rest of the game, because he was so into it. So I always fondly think of him whenever I go there. Anyways, after some plasma shenanigans, I leave my favorite section of the game and head on over to Castelia. And here, in Relic Passage, I catch a Timber named Steely Dan, who even with his plus speed minus attack timid nature, is gonna be amazing with sheer force. I also find a Cottonee I named Blondie in the Castelia Garden. Now this is a Pokemon who thrives with a timid nature, and while I'm training, I learned the Battle Company apparently has battle quotas, which leads me to ask, what do these guys actually sell in the first place? How do they make money? I am so confused. Anyways, shortly thereafter, Strokes evolves into a Watchog, and then Anthrax evolves into a Whirlipede, which was very needed. But not for this battle against Berg. This battle should not have been as easy as it was. My only Pokemon with super effective moves against Bug are either a first stage Pokemon, and thus kind of frail, or are weak to Berg's Dwebble. So what I do is lead Strokes, who hypnotizes Berg's Swadloon. That wasn't a guarantee, but works for me. Then I KO him with 2 newly learned returns, boosted by a Silk Scarf. Dwebble is in now, so I go for Hypnosis again, and it lands. This means 2 crunches can do over half. Dwebble wakes up after this though, but just goes for Smackdown, letting me KO. And since this tactic worked so well for the last 2 Pokemon, why not make it 3? I go for Hypnosis on Leavanny, and it connects! This is getting really lucky. A return then does over half, before his Citrus Berry takes him back to the green. I think we can KO here though, so Strokes goes for return. And Leavanny survives on a sliver, wakes up, and uses String Shot. That's not the worst thing we could have seen, so I'm not too mad. But now that Berg heals, I can just re-up Hypnosis. This means that even though Strokes is slower, she's barely taken any damage, and can hit back hard and safely with 2 more returns to KO for the win. But that was so lucky. Landing 4 consecutive Hypnoses is under a 13% chance. We would have been safe with a miss here or there, but this means that I could just sweep everyone with Watchog and ditch any thoughts of a backup plan. And after beating Colress, shout out the Dan. I can catch a Sandile in Desert Resort who I named Jawbreaker. I said this in my first video ever, I think, but this evolution line is one of my all-time favorites. I adore the Krookodile line, so this will probably be my one exception to the soft guideline I have for this run of not using any Pokemon I've used in runs before whenever possible. This does mean I can't catch Maractus, but that's a price I'm willing to pay. And when going back to get Jawbreaker from the PC, Steely Dan evolves into a Gurdurr. That's as far as he's going to go with no trades, but it's a pretty big upgrade. And getting Jawbreaker, she has a minus attack calm nature unfortunately, but she's got the incredible Intimidate ability, allowing me to finally have an Intimidator and a complete team for the first time this run. She also learns Thief, so I start using her for item farming, particularly getting the Black Sludge for Anthrax. Now, the next Pokemon I can get is on Route 4, and I've guaranteed her here. On Thursdays, you can find a Mandibuzz in Black 2, because they realized it was maybe a little unrealistic to put the baby birds at the end of the game. The only downside is that she's got her hidden ability in weak armor, but she's filling out the roster for now in the place of LCD Sound System, who's just got a little too much overlap with Strokes for their pairing to quite work, and isn't quite as good as her right now. But she's not staying on the team for long. After hitting up Join Avenue, maybe the best feature of the Unova games, if you ignore the fact that they have a 10-year-old managing what's effectively a giant mall, I go up to Route 16. Here, by hunting for shaking grass spots, I can find an Emolga, one of my favorite Pika clones. I catch her and name her Television, and even with a bad minus attack plus defense bold nature, she'll be a great fit for the team. I also have access to 2 Pokemon in Losthorn Forest, Panpour and Pansage. I really want Panpour, who's the only water type I get access to this run, believe it or not, but I end up finding and catching a Pansage instead, who I named Midtown, emphasis on mid. That officially blocks me out of Panpour, who'd have been great for Clay. At least on the bright side, Jawbreaker evolves into a Krokorok. And if you missed LCD Sound System, don't worry too much. See, in a battle against one of the basketball players, a takedown from a worked up Herdier KOs Anthrax. Making matters even worse, in my first gym trainer battle in Nimbasa, I'm battling a Flaffy, who uses an Electro Ball that crits to KO Strokes. Both of these are at a particularly rough time for me, because I'm gonna need raw power if I want to make it past Elisa. Now, that said, all is not lost. I actually have a great Pokemon at my disposal who can really do some serious damage to Elisa. So to start this fight, I lead Jawbreaker. Now, Emolga can rack up some damage with Quick Attack, and my lack of ability to KO with Rock Tomb means that she can get in another. But one more Rock Tomb lands to KO! Now, Flaffy isn't a big problem except for static, as Jawbreaker outspeeds, and then cleanly one-shots with Dig. And no static activation means I can keep this party moving. One more Pokemon left, and that's Zebstrika. I'm coming in with Jawbreaker at a little lower health than I thought she'd be at, but I think we should be fine. Except, Flame Charge does almost exactly half of her remaining HP. Krokorok is still a little slow, so I should have anticipated this, but that's terrifying if Dig doesn't kill. And after Jawbreaker's Oranberry activates for a bit more breathing room, this is exactly what happens. Dig actually activates Zebstrika's Citrus Berry, taking her just out of healing range. So now, all I need is to just not get crit. I breathe in and click Dig. And Zebstrika goes for a strong but not critical Quick Attack that keeps Jawbreaker alive, letting her KO Zebstrika to complete the sweep. But things are really starting to get tricky. What's not tricky though is the encounter on Route 5 I've now guaranteed myself. Here, I catch a Gothitelle I named New York Dolls. I love this line, but I'm not using her in this run because I just used one like 5 Nuzlocks ago, in my purple Pokemon only run, which you should watch. And while I thought there wasn't anything in between here and Clay, that's actually not quite true. See, members of the old Team Plasma, which still exists essentially in its original form for some reason, lead me to Rude, who gives me a Zoroark. Despite the fact that I just don't think this plot point was handled well, even though I love the idea of an evil team reckoning with the damage they caused, I'll definitely take this Zoroark. Blondie also evolves into Whimsicott here. Actually, LCD Sound System also evolves into a Stoutland a few levels earlier than I thought he did. So that's not bad at all for Clay. Now, I do what I think makes most sense here and lead with Blondie. Clay's a little easier here than in the original games because of a higher level cap and slightly lower team diversity, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. Blondie's my best special attacker, so it doesn't matter if she gets intimidated. She outspeeds, and the Giga Drain takes Zoroark out cleanly. Next up is Sandslash, probably because of Fury Cutter, but a Giga Drain should keep him alive on a sliver. Crush Claw does around a third in response, but that could have gotten dicey. This prompts Clay to use a Hyper Potion, and it looks like Giga Drain just low-rolled last time, because this time we get the KO. It's just Excadrill left. Blondie probably shouldn't stay in for long, but I decide to set up Paralysis. Except Stunspore misses. Well, Bulldoze hurts, but with Prankster, I can just outspeed to hit him with my second try. But a Metal Claw brings Blondie down to half. I don't want to risk a crit setting up Leech Seed or anything, so I'm just gonna hope Paralysis has a big enough effect. I swap into Steely Dan, who comes in on a Bulldoze that even with an Eviolite, still does way more damage than I'd like. But now, he can use Wake Up Slap to do just over half. But with Citrus Berry recovery, it's looking like I'll need 2 more hits for the win. But I won't even get that chance, because Bulldoze crits, sending Steely Dan to the red. I've gotta switch now, and my next best option is probably Jawbreaker, so I go into her, only for her to get taken under half by Bulldoze 2. Not really a great sign. So I really need LCD to get the win then. Television and Kiss the Mandibuzz are both weak to Rock Slide, and don't have any neutral attacking moves, so this is my last good chance. I swap LCD in on a Bulldoze that does around a quarter. Then, after another, he digs. Dig connects, and Excadrill survives in the red. I need a boost. I go for Workup as I assume Clay will heal, but he actually just attacks. Does that mean he's out of potions? If that's the case, I go for Crunch, and Excadrill faints for the win. That battle was so much tougher than it needed to be, for literally no reason. Shout out my team for eking it out though. And then, after another great feature in the Pokemon World Tournament, and a quick trip to the less great Plasma Frigate, I get the Pokemon I'm most excited about. In Relic Passage, I can mosey my way into Relic Castle and find and catch a Volcarona I named Taking Back Sunday. I'm over the moon I get him on the team, and I replace Kiss as a result. This does mean I can't get Cofagrigus, but the sacrifice is worth it here for one of the best encounters in the game. Then, right after that, I get another great encounter. In the Season Research Lab, a scientist hands me a deerling I named the Antlers. Not only does she have Serene Grace, but she also has an adamant nature. I don't want to add her to the party quite yet though, because my team already has 3 weaknesses to flying. And adding another isn't great, especially right before Skyla. But she's coming onto the team if anything happens to any of them. But I do get a replacement right after that though. In the Stoutland Cave, I get arguably the best Gen 5 Pokemon you can have, an Axew I name Ramones. She's got a plus attack minus special defense naughty nature, and she's absolutely replacing LCD Sound System, because what an incredible upgrade. I also get access to either Ferroseed or Klink in Chargestone Cave, and I end up getting Klink, who I named Dirty Projectors. They probably aren't the best Pokemon I could get here, but they give me another good special attacker, who I'm bringing on now in the place of Blondie. I also get to Mistralton City, and just north of here, the extremely underused Seasons gimmick comes into play. See, I can either catch a Zebstrika or a Cubchoo on Route 7, and not only have I used Zebstrika more recently, but Cubchoo is the only ice encounter I get in a run with both the gym leader and the champion having dragon teams, so this feels like the clearly better move. But there's no way to guarantee a Cubchoo here. My best bet is waiting until winter, which was only a week away, but even then, they both have roughly even rates of appearing. I didn't get any luck in the Hidden Grotto, so I had to try my hand in the grass, and the first Pokemon who shows up is a Cubchoo! Nice! I catch him and name him Grizzly Bear. He's got an awesome lonely nature, so I'm switching him in for Steely Dan, who despite being a much better band, won't be as good in the late game. This does prevent me from getting Zebstrika, but I think the trade-off's pretty worth it if I can only have one. I also finally meet Juniper, which is so weird if she's my mom's friend, right? And she tells me to go to Celestial Tower. This part always felt so lazy to me. Like they couldn't think up another reason why you'd recreate the same game loop as the originals, but still wanted you to go there. At least when I get there, I can catch one of my favorite Pokemon, Litwick, who I named Vampire Weekend. and she's gonna come on the team in the place of taking back Sunday, mostly just because I adore this evolution line, even though in this case she's weaker, has a minus special attack nature, and has her worst ability in Flash Fire. So now, with my relatively new look team, I get to grinding, and we get some pretty fast evolutions. First up, Grizzly Bear evolves into a Beartic at level 37. Next, Ramones evolves into a powerful Fracture. Last up, Dirty Projectors evolves into a Klang, taking us from a baby team to a mostly partially evolved team that can pack a punch. And this is perfect for Skyla. See, while most of the gym leaders in this game are at least a little tricky, Skyla gets hard countered by Dirty Projectors, with only her Swanna knowing a move that even hits neutrally. As a result, aside from some flinches and a Charge Beam miss, Projectors can Charge Beam sweep Skyla's whole team, doing progressively more damage as they get Charge Beam's associated special attack boosts. This means that the only Pokemon who can even be kinda difficult is Skarmory, and only because she has Sturdy. But after Skyla wastes a Hyper Potion, 2 more Charge Beams get the job done for an easy win. And this part of the game is where my Unova sequel experience always craters. For all the valid criticism of the slog between Gyms 1 and 2 in Pokemon X and Y, people never really talk about how boring and disorienting this part of the game is. There's a little plot progression, but you're just kind of dropped into a different and otherwise inaccessible part of the region, and then forced to go through all these cities without almost anything significant happening. It single-handedly sucks me out of what are otherwise mostly really good games. At least I can get some new Pokemon in this stretch. In Reversal Mountain, after Jawbreaker evolves into a Krookodile, I catch an Excadrill, possibly the best encounter in this game after Haxorus. I name her Spin Doctors. Then, in my very next battle, Vampire Weekend evolves into a Lampent, and then I immediately evolve her again into a Chandelure. This Pokemon destroyed my last Nuzlocke. I'm darn sure gonna get my use out of her this one. On Route 14, I catch a Mienfoo I name Sonic Youth. Instead of taking him though, I actually have a different Pokemon I want to try out. See, Antlers the Deerling has been calling out to me, and it's time I respond. I bring her on, replacing Dirty Projectors, who I don't think will be quite as useful in the long run. After my first rival battle in Forever, in which Television sweeps without taking a hit point of damage, Antlers evolves into a Sawsbuck. And after all that, I have one final encounter for a good long while. Not that I'm gonna use Quicksand the Shelmet ever, but she's in the box somewhere as the ultimate backup. But after all that, disaster strikes as in a battle in the Opelucid Gym, Antlers faces a Fracture, who fast-tracks her through Hospice by setting up Swagger as she Mega Horns. As a result, when she tries to attack next turn, she hurts herself in Confusion to do a third, after which Dual Chop hits just hard enough to do the rest. You didn't really get to see her in action, but trust me when I say that Antlers the Sawsbuck was incredible as an offensive powerhouse. Sure, I've got Sonic Youth as a solid backup, but I wanted to use Antlers for Marlon so badly. She'll be missed. After a horrendous amount of grinding, maybe the most excruciating grind I've ever done in a Nuzlocke, all my team get up to the cap of 48 to face Drayden. On top of that, Ramones evolves into a Haxorus to reach her final form as a superpowered sweeper. And that's exactly what she does against Drayden. Because of Dragon Tail, I don't even want to risk setting up a Dragon Dance or two only to get hit with a super effective Dragon Tail and potentially have her get KO'd, let alone just losing her boosts with a forced switch. So I just go with the Draco Plate boosted Dragon Claw, and Ramones not only outspeeds but KOs each of Drayden's team members with one Dragon Claw apiece. Then, after Team Plasma attacks Opelucid City, Sonic Youth evolves into a Mienshao. That's pretty much all that happens between Gyms 7 and 8 though, so now it's time to face Marlon. I lead with Sonic Youth, who jump kicks his Caracosta as he just sets up Shell Smash. That doesn't matter much though, because Marlon has to Hyper Potion now. So I use Drain Punch to send him back to the red. Then, I can simply outspeed, and with another, Caracosta's down for the count. Seeing super effective damage with Wailord's Bounce, Marlon sends him out. But that's perfect for me, as I simply U-turn into Television. Bounce misses, so I can hit Wailord with a Discharge. But I forgot to attach a Magnet! That's gonna make this fight so annoying. As a result, Skull takes Television just above half, so I'm worried about a crit now. But I've gotta attack, and for whatever reason, Marlon doesn't heal, so one more Discharge cleanly KOs. This just leaves Jellicent, but I'm a little worried about Television's ability to tank another Scald. So because of that, I go for Volt Switch, doing a third, but who do I switch into? Actually, Ramon's might be perfect. I bring her in on a Scald that thankfully doesn't burn, and with one Dragon Claw, I've beaten the 8th gym leader for good. Marlon just kinda swims off in defeat, though at least he gave me his badge first. And now, we get the giant Team Plasma Gauntlet. This could have been trimmed down a little, but we get to start it off with Marlon dropping a bridge for us, making a case for neutrality against a literal terrorist organization, and then leaving. Very bizarre creative decision. Anyways, there are no fights here that have any real importance. However, that swiftly changes when I'm faced with Colress and Giant Chasm. Even though Colress is nominally a steel user, he's got more than just that, with Eviolite on his Magneton, a Behemoth, and a Klinklang with an air balloon, as well as the ability to do massive neutral damage, with attacks like Explosion and Giga Impact. There are a couple solutions here that might work, but I decided to go with the one that feels smoothest. I lead Jawbreaker, who I've attached leftovers to. Without items, she could easily solo this fight, but it's not quite that simple. She goes for her newly learned Earthquake, as Magneton uses Flash Cannon, doing a third. But thankfully, I can just crunch to break sturdy again as Colress full restores, and Jawbreaker gets some health back with leftovers. Now, another Earthquake KOs. This brings in Magnezone. I go for another Earthquake, but they use Explosion, which Jawbreaker survives in the red. I'm so proud of her. That wasn't a guarantee without leftovers, but with that, we're on to Behemoth. Even though Jawbreaker probably shouldn't stay in, I think she'll be able to KO him, and with a crunch, I'm right. This leads Colress to send in Klinklang. Because of the air balloon, staying in is a death wish. As a result, I switched to Vampire Weekend. This ends up being a great call, as Klinklang went for Giga Impact. And I've got an easy KO here, as long as Vampire Weekend lands Heat Wave, which she does, as Klinklang just goes for a Shift Gear. All that's left is Metang, but we outspeed, and Heat Wave connects to KO for a thankfully deathless win. And after Ghetsis tries to go nuclear on a child, it's time to fight him. Well, rather, it's time to fight Kyurem Black first. This whole sequence is a big threat, involving a dominant legendary before fighting Ghetsis' powerful and balanced team, all without healing. So because I don't have a great strategy here, I lead with Ramon's. But Dragon Claw doesn't even get Kyurem to the red. But Kyurem just charges up Freeze Shock. I'm saved. One more Dragon Claw gets the KO, and I can somehow just move on. So I got rid of Ramon's Draco Plate for a Pecha Berry for this fight. Probably didn't help my range against Kyurem Black, but it wasn't gonna kill anyways without a crit. Here though, I think it's a great opportunity to set up Dragon Dance on the Cofagrigus. This means that she gets poisoned next turn now that her Pecha Berry's gone, but she's still quite powerful. Though not powerful enough to KO Cofagrigus, who survives in the red before Ghetsis full restores. And Cofagrigus gets cheeky, protecting to get some more recovery with leftovers and letting the Toxic build up. That means that by the time he's down, Ramon's is only at 40%. But I need her to get rid of Ghetsis' Hydreigon, the only Pokemon line that truly freaks me out. And Ramon's outspeeds and uses Dragon Claw, which KOs. That feels amazing. And she doesn't even faint from Toxic next turn, so I decide to swap to Television on Ghetsis' Seismitoad, who just went for Earthquake. That means I can stick him into using it with Encore, making a chunk of this fight free. 2 Acrobatics get rid of Seismitoad for good, bringing in Electros. Here, I swap for Jawbreaker, who comes in on a Thunderbolt. A crunch does over half, as Electros uses an Acrobatics that does way less than I thought it would. One more crunch KOs, sending in Drapion. But now, this fight is totally chill. With an Earthquake, I can get rid of him, and then another gets rid of Ghetsis' Toxicroak that comes in after, saving me from a disgusting fight. Now that I've saved the world, all that's left is the Pokemon League. Or well, that would be true if there weren't 3 more things I could do. First, on Victory Road, I find a sock after 20 minutes of searching, who I catch and name Nada Surf. Second, I can head back to Route 23 now, where I can guarantee myself a Bouffalant, who I named Yeah Yeah Yes, to finish the theme with an amazing band. She's unfortunately less amazing than I'd like though, with a minus speed plus special attack nature. At least not a Surf has an adamant nature and sturdy. Finally, I fight my rival for the last time. His team would be rough if I didn't already have a pretty good matchup against him. I lead Television. A discharge only brings Unpheasant to the right before he uses Facade to do exactly half. Not a great sign! After my rival heals, 2 more discharges get rid of Unpheasant to bring in Simipour. Not sure why he'd go for a water type against an electric type here, but I can't really complain. A Volt Switch out does over half, so now I can go into Sonic Youth as Simipour misses Rock Slide. And since Sonic Youth's damageless, he can fire off an Acrobatics without worry to get the drop. Bouffalante's out now, and while I'd be in trouble if a high jump kick misses, it doesn't here, so I get an easy KO. Last is Emboar, but I'm just a little worried about Sonic Youth's frailness now, so I U-turn into Ramon's. She comes in on a Brick Break that does about a third, but I risk it and go for Dragon Claw, which leaves Emboar in the low yellow. But barring a crit, I'm fine here. And we're good! With that, I can head on over to the league. In what's most likely the least amount of training I've ever done after getting there, I'm ready to go in. Here's my team. Can we avenge my Pokemon White run? Let's see how we do. So the best option to start with is clearly Caitlyn to me. And she makes things even easier for me as she switches her Musharna out for Reuniclus on the first turn, letting Jawbreaker immediately KO with an Expert Belt boosted Crunch. This brings Sigilif in, who meets the same fate. She's followed up by Gothitelle, who actually survives a Crunch, but just goes for Calm Mind. So thanks to Citrus Recovery, she's out of healing range and falls to another. But that's not true of Musharna, who survives Crunch and then yawns Jawbreaker. But anticipating Caitlyn healing, I swapped to Vampire Weekend, who can now Shadow Ball to... Okay, well I guess Musharna survives, but just goes for yawn. But I don't have to worry about sleep, because Caitlyn doesn't heal, so one final Shadow Ball gets the KO and the win. Next up is Grimsley. This time, I lead with Sonic Youth, who, thanks to Inner Focus, doesn't get flinched by Liepard's Fake Out, and can regain all her health with the Drain Punch KO. This time, she has the Expert Belt. Bisharp's in next, so another gets rid of her too, leveling Sonic Youth up. Krookodile does get an attack drop, but that's nothing as a high jump kick gets the KO anyways. Last is Scrafty, who goes down to a second for a clean win. Third is Chantal. I'm kinda scared of her after last time, but I have something I didn't have last Nuzlocke, a Chandelure of my own. I lead Vampire Weekend, and with the spell tag attached, she just goes to town. Shadow Ball takes out Cofagrigus. Next, Galurk comes in and they fall too. Next up is Driftblim, who pops in to say hi before getting popped like a balloon by another Shadow Ball, leveling her up. Last up is Chantal's own Chandelure, who near single-handedly ended my run of white. But one Shadow Ball instantly downs her to complete the sweep. That means last is Marshall, who I really don't have a good strategy for. He's become maybe the most challenging Elite Four member in any Pokemon game for me. But I get an idea. I've been using Ramon's as a crutch for chunks of this game, and why stop here? I lead her with leftovers attached. Then I set up a Dragon Dance, taking a Bulldoze in return. But that's fine because I'm confident a Haxorus can outspeed all of Marshall's Pokemon. Next turn, we repeat. I'm not positive, but I think 2 should be enough. So I go for Dragon Claw, which KOs! Nice! One more KOs Mienshao too, but Conkeldurr survives in the red, but just goes for Bulk Up. I guess I'm unpunished. One more gets the KO. But I'm a little worried about Sock. With Sturdy, Retaliate or Payback could be devastating. So I swap into Television, who does end up getting hit by Payback. But that's okay, because even though it does nearly half, the Volt Switch I use next turn crits Sock to break Sturdy and take him below half. Perfect for Sonic Youth, who comes in on a resisted Rock Slide. That means that one Acrobatics lets me beat the Elite Four deathless. All that's left is Iris, and she's one of the toughest champions of any Pokemon game, with access to items and a whole lot of power. But she's the only one left standing in my way, so she's going down. I lead Sonic Youth and instantly get rid of Iris's Hydreigon with a high jump kick. Not a bad start, but then she brings in Druddigon. I kinda assumed she'd just go for Haxorus, so I'm a bit stunned. I think the best option is if I go into Jawbreaker, but Druddigon hits a Focus Blast to bring Jawbreaker to the low yellow. I've gotta go for Earthquake, but she survives and hits another! I'm stunned that she landed 2 Focus Blasts in a row. What rough luck for Jawbreaker. One of my most consistently excellent Pokemon of the run. Rest well, bud. But this gives me an idea. What if I bring in Ramones now? I was saving her for the end, but I could get some good damage here and maybe break the game open a little. So I send her in, and as Iris heals, I go for Dragon Dance. And with that, one Dragon Claw KOs Druddigon. Then, one more does the same to Lapras. Except maybe it doesn't. She survives, but just goes for Sing? What a waste! It doesn't even land. Like Iris almost doesn't want to win this fight or something. Another Dragon Claw gets the job done. A fourth does the same to Archeops, who when outsped isn't nearly scary enough to be a threat. But because I didn't teach Ramones any fighting or ground moves, she can't really do anything to Aggron. As a result, I've gotta switch into Television. But Aggron goes for Automatize, getting a big speed boost. At least Television can Encore Trap her, so she can't really do any damage. Unless Aggron outspeeds! That's so annoying. Now the only Pokemon who can really come in is Vampire Weekend. I switch her in, and because Aggron's locked into Double Edge, 2 Heat Waves can cleanly finish her off, leaving just Haxorus left. This isn't the position I wanted to be in though. Haxorus is too powerful, and is clearly going to outspeed. So all I can hope for is Vampire Weekend breaking her Focus Sash. She goes for Will-O-Wisp, as Haxorus uses Earthquake, and survives to burn her. That was critical. But my best chance at a win now is letting her go. So with one more Will-O-Wisp, Vampire Weekend gives up the gun. But this lets me bring in a new Pokemon. And Grizzly Bear hasn't gotten any screen time in the Elite Four, so let's do him. As he comes in, Haxorus goes for Dragon Dance, meaning that one Icicle Crash can connect to get the KO for the win. And that's how I beat a Hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Black 2. Honestly, these games were much more fun to do a Hardcore Nuzlocke of than a traditional playthrough, but the back half really drags. The battles this game were a blast though. It's so funny to have a party full of the exact same kind of Pokemon. I'm not sure if it's setting myself up for success inherently, but my party was half Glass Cannon, letting me sweep with force, but also leaving me vulnerable to a sweep by any stronger, faster cannon. It definitely led me to some nail-biters to say the least. But that said, the MVP of the run in my eyes was definitely Ramones the Haxorus. She carried me through pretty much any obstacle with the right setup. Who else do you think deserves an MVP vote though? Let me know in the comments. I'm glad I had access to so many good options here. This run is really making me wonder how things will go when we get to the 3D games, where the encounters list drops off substantially. But that's for a later video because this is a wrap. Please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any suggestions or things you'd like to see me do, leave a comment, at me on Twitter, or email me with your suggestion at ed40plays@gmail.com. Next up, we're gonna try fighting types only in Gen 1. Can the worst Pokemon type in Kanto beat a Hardcore Nuzlocke in its least charitable games? Find out next time!